Common Sense and Nuclear Warfare by Bertrand, read by the author. The final chapter, chapter 10. Some necessary changes in outlook. I shall not be reading the appendices, as I believe, as of yet, my YouTube career has been relatively ineffective. Some of the measures advocated in the preceding pages are such as will, in the present temper of the world, arouse vehement opposition both in the West and in the East. They are advocated as not improbable minimum conditions for a continued existence of Homo sapiens, but certain widespread prejudices prevent clear thinking on the subject of international relationships and make it difficult for intelligence to operate freely in the sphere. I wish, in this chapter, to deal with the most important of these obstacles and with the ways by which they can be overcome. 1. Fanaticism. There are many people in the West, and I suppose also in the East, who consider that the extermination of the human race would be preferable to the victory of the ideology that they dislike. They maintain that the evils inflicted by the Kremlin or by Wall Street, as the case may be, are so great that in a world dominated by either, life would not be worth living, and it would be a kindness to future generations to prevent them from being born. On this ground, it is argued that, if nothing short of a nuclear war can prevent the victory of the other side, a nuclear war should be waged, even should it involve a risk of universal death. I cannot but regard such a point of view as one exhibiting ferocious fanaticism. By a curious inconsistency, those in the West who take this point of view maintain that they are defending democracy, although they must be aware that a plebiscite of the world would give an overwhelming majority against them. And it is not only democracy, but also freedom that these fanatics consider themselves to be defending. I sometimes wonder how they would phrase the argument in a discussion, say, with an inhabitant of India. An Indian would be very likely to say that he considered both Russia and the Western ideologies partly good and partly bad, but that the greater portion of what makes up the lives of most human beings is independent of ideologies and can exist under either system. Our fanatics would have to tell him that such a point of view is base, in fact, so base as to be worthy of the death penalty. I do not think he would be able to persuade his Indian interlocutor that such punishment is deserved either in the name of either in the name of democracy or in the name of freedom. I think the argument which we are concerned can, with profit, be considerably widened. The great majority of mankind, even in politically educated countries, are occupied throughout the greater part of their time with quite unpolitical matters. They are concerned to eat and sleep, they are concerned with love and family, they are concerned with success or failure in their work, and with the joy or pain of living according to the state of their health. If you were to say to an ordinary person, seriously, and as a practical issue, would you rather live under a political and economic system different from your own and have all mankind die an agonizing death? He would think you mad, and not without justification. Only a man who has lost his sense of human values through preoccupation with controversy can hesitate to answer the question as every sane man must answer it. Those who have been occupied in combating communism or in combating capitalism are likely to become obsessed by a belief that nothing else matters in comparison. In a life of dusty argument, they have lost all sight of everyday joys and sorrows. But when it comes to preferring the extermination of mankind to the victory of an ideology which they dislike, there are other, less general arguments to be considered. There have been many bad governments and bad systems in the past. Genghis Khan, for example, was quite as bad, as fanatical, as anti-communist believed Stalin to have been. But his tyranny did not last forever, and if his enemies had had the power to extinguish human life rather than submit to his brutalities, nobody, in the present day, would regret their not having exercised his power. Anybody who supposes that the tyranny of the Kremlin or the tyranny of Wall Street, as the case may be, would last forever if for a moment is achieved world victory, he is being totally unhistorical and is showing himself an unbalanced victim of the bugbears. Issues that seem to contemporaries as important as the issues of communism and capitalism seems to fanatics of the present day have repeatedly arisen in the past and have been shown by the course of time to be not so tremendous as contemporaries suppose. There is a well-known passage in Gibbon in which he considers what would have happened if the Mohammedans had won the Battle of Tours. To the Christians of the day, the issue appeared as momentous as the issue of our own time appears to Senator McCarthy and to Stalin. But it may well be doubted whether the present-day world would be much different from what it is if the Mohammedans had been the victors and not the vanquished in the infamous conflict. So long as there are human beings, they will pursue their human purposes, partly good, partly bad. There will be systems of government that inflict purposeless suffering, and there will be systems that make for human well-being. But if no human being remains, the whole fabric of good and evil that men have gradually built up will be demolished. The pessimism of those who believe that under this or that system nothing good can ever emerge is to me incomprehensible. Religious fanaticism has gradually decayed through experience of the futility of religious wars. Catholics and Protestants, Christians and Mohammedans have learned to acquiesce in each other's existence, which was at one time thought quite impossible. But the newer controversies of our own time have caused many people to forget the tolerance which was slowly learned in the 17th and 18th centuries. When Locke wrote in favour of religious toleration, there were many who were outraged by his arguments, and there are many in the present day who are outraged when arguments are applied to existing controversies. But the reason which led to the success of his contentions had nothing to do with the particular nature of the controversies of his time. The reasons are valid now as they were valid then, and the arguments against toleration in our day are the same as the arguments of Loyola and Calvin and at an earlier time. Many, both in the East and in the West, have forgotten the reasons which formerly produced tolerance. The reasons must be remembered if we are ever to find a solution for our troubles. Above all, we must remember that no one is infallible, not even ourselves, and that no dogma is so certain as to afford an excuse for widespread cruelty. 2. Nationalism. In any approach towards the creation of a world authority, certain distributive forces raise difficulties which at times seem almost inseparable. The opposition between communism and capitalism is the most noticeable obstacle to world unity at the present day. But there is another, namely nationalism, which would remain if communism and capitalism had learned to tolerate each other. Nationalism in each nation consists partly of beliefs as to one's own nation's actions and partly of ethical maxims supposed to follow from these beliefs. I shall be speaking mainly of the bad aspects of nationalism, but I wish to say emphatically that it has also its good aspects. It would not be a good thing if people all over the world were alike. Culturally, the differences between different nations give a desirable variety and are a stimulus in literature and art. It is only when nationalism leads to armed strife that it becomes a danger. It is wholly a good thing when a nation has independence in everything except violent hostility to other nations. If an international authority is ever created, it will have to limit its interferences with nation-states to matters likely to disturb international peace. If it does more than this, it becomes tyranny. But, having said this, we must now turn our attention to the dangerous aspects of nationalism. Unlike capitalism and communism, nationalism is not a single, world-spread system, but it is a different system in each nation. It consists essentially in collective self-glorification and in a conviction that it is right to pursue the interests of one's own nation, however they may conflict with those of others. In the 18th century, the British proclaimed the slogan, "Britons never shall be slaves," and proceeded to make slaves of as many non-Britons as they could. The French, shortly afterwards, proclaimed, "Let impure blood water our furrows," the impure blood being that of Australians. I recently received a letter from a German explaining that Deutschland über alles does not mean that Germany should rule the world, but that a German should think only of German interests. One could multiply examples indefinitely, but the phenomenon is too familiar to need further illustration. It is rather odd to emphasize upon the merits of one's own nation should be considered a virtue. We should think of an individual who proclaimed, "I am morally and intellectually superior to all other individuals, and because of this superiority, I have a right to ignore all interests except my own." There are, no doubt, plenty of people who feel this way, but if they are to proclaim their feeling too openly and act upon it too blatantly, their thoughts there are thoughts ill of. They are thought ill of. When, however, a number of such individuals constituting the population of some area collectively make such a declaration about themselves, they are thought noble and splendid and spirited. They put up statues to each other and teach school children to admire the most blatant advocates of the national conceit. We have become so accustomed to nationalism that it has come to seem an inherent part of human nature. History, however, does not bear out this view. In antiquity, there was hardly any nationalism except that of the Jews. In the Middle Ages, when ecclesiastics travelled freely throughout the Catholic world, their partisan feelings were centered upon their church and not upon their nation. The nationalism of modern times has grown up, mainly, as a reaction against foreign imperialism. One may put its beginning at the time of Joan of Arc, when the French were roused to collective resistance against English conquest. The English nationalism began when the resistance to Spanish Armada and found its classic expression a few years later in Shakespeare. German and Russian nationalism had their origin in resistance to Napoleon. American nationalism in resistance to the Redcoats. Unfortunately, there is a psychologically natural dynamic which has almost invariably governed the development of nationalism. In the course of the struggle against foreign domination, those who are fighting for freedom, not unnaturally, exaggerate their own merits and the demerits of foreign oppressors. When they have won freedom, the beliefs formerly appropriate survive and are thought to justify foreign conquest. The appeal to group self-esteem fits in well with people's natural propensities that it is not easily combated, except when there are dissident groups having a collective self-esteem at variance with that of their nation. Nelson, before the French Revolution, instructed midshipmen that they should hate a Frenchman as they would the devil, and the young man to whom he commanded his precept had no difficulty in accepting it and in continuing to believe it throughout 22 years of war. Mankind survived the wars that have taken place hitherto, but it is doubtful whether survival will be possible in future wars. For this reason, it has become imperative that sentiments promoting violent hostility between different groups must somehow be softened. I had spoken earlier of the need of tolerance as between communists and capitalist ideologies, and there is need of such the same kind of tolerance between nations. To bring this about will be no easy task, but it is one which will have to be undertaken before world peace can be secure and before any international authority can win general acceptance. It is essentially an educational task. What can be done in this direction if powerful governments become sincerely anxious for world peace will be our next topic of discussion. 3. Education. If great powers can reach agreement that war is no longer to be an instrument of policy, one of the things that will have to be changed is education. Education, in most countries, is mainly in the hands of the national state and, therefore, tends to teach an outlook which is considered to be in the interest of the state concerned. It has not been thought hitherto that the interests of one state coincided with those of another, nor indeed has this been true always, or even usually, in former times. It is the development of modern techniques, and, more especially, of nuclear weapons, that has made armed contests between states futile and has brought about an identity of interest between different countries far surpassing what was true at any earlier time. It follows that it is no longer in the interest of any country to emphasize its superiority to other countries or to cause its boys and girls to believe in invincible in war. Nor is it a good thing to present martial glory as what is, above all things, to be admired. It is, especially in the teaching of history, that changes are called for. This applies not only to the lower grades, but just as much in the highest academic teaching. Hegel, who announced that he had survived all human history, picked up 3 individuals as having the most outstanding merit. They were Alexander, Caesar, and Napoleon. His academic successors in his own country were more enthusiastic and preferred German heroes, while French boys were being taught that heroism is French, and English boys that it is English. This sort of thing will have to cease. I suggest long ago though with no hope that the suggestion would be adopted, that in every country the history of that country should be taught from books written by foreigners. No doubt such books would have a bias, but it would be opposed to the opposite bias in the pupils, and the outcome might be fairly just. But it is not only history that needs to be differently taught. Everything, except perhaps arithmetic, should be taught as part of the progress of man, and as a series of steps in the conquest of obstacles which he has been faced and is still faced. There is a danger that, in ceasing to emphasize wars, teaching will cease to be exciting. But this danger can be entirely avoided by emphasizing exciting contests with difficulties in ages other than those of war. There are, one may say, three great spheres of contest involved. In the gradual approach of man towards reason. There are the contests with nature, the contests between men, and the contests within a man's own self. Each of these has its own history and its own importance. The contests with nature, which begin with the problem of securing food, led on step by step to the scientific understanding of natural processes and technical power of utilizing sources of energy. It is in this sphere that man's greatest triumphs have hitherto been won. It is likely that many, even greater triumphs will be achieved in that not very distant future. The theory of man's increasing mastery over nature is inherently exciting, and it is felt to be so by the young, except when it is taught in schools. It could be just as exciting in schools if teachers were adequate and the method prescribed were appropriate. Love of adventure, which hitherto has been too often an incentive to war, can find abundant openings in the sphere of natural knowledge. Explorations in America, Africa, the Poles, and the Himalayas could all be made vivid by being shown in moving pictures on the screen. The future possibilities of space travel, which are now left mainly to unfounded fantasy, could be more soberly treated without ceasing to be interesting, and could show to even the most adventurous of the young that a world without war need not be a world without adventurous and hazardous glory. To this kind of contest there is no limit. Each victory is only a prelude to another, and no boundaries can be set to rational hope. The second kind of conflict, namely that of man with other men, when it consists of armed combat between groups, is one with which we have been especially concerned in this book. It is one which, on any rational survey, must be ended if human progress is to continue. I am not contending, in a full-fledged pacifist might, that contests between different groups of men have never in the past served a useful purpose. I do not think that this would be true if it has happened over and over again that barbarians have descended from mountains upon fruitful plains and civilized cities, and done vast damage before civilized forces could curb their destructive vigor. But the increased area occupied by civilized men, and the increased power with which modern weapons have conferred upon them, has reduced to very small proportions the danger of such cataclysms, and as the disruption of the Roman Empire by the barbarians. It is not now barbarians who constitute danger. On the contrary, it is those who are in the foremost of civilizations. It should be one of the tasks of educators to make vivid in minds of the youth both the merits of a civilized way of life and the needless dangers to which it is expected by survival of competitive ideals which have become archaic. In the great majority of human beings, there is, in addition to outer conflicts, an inner conflict between different impulses and desires which are not mutually compatible. Systems of morality are intended to deal with such conflicts, and so, to a certain degree, they are often successful. But I think that changing conditions of human life makes changes of moral outlook necessary from time to time. One such change, which is especially necessary in the present time, is that each individual should learn to view groups of human beings other than his own as possible cooperators, rather than as probable competitors. But this whole subject is a very large one, and to pursue it would take us too far from our central theme. What the world needs most in education, as in other departments of human life, is the substitution of hope for fear, and the realization of the splendid thing that life may be if the human family cooperatively will permit itself to realize its best potentials.